25 and my husband 42 have 3 children, a 2-year-old son and a set of twin girls who are 3 months old. We live just down the road from my parents. I have 4 older siblings that all went to college, but I didn't. I'm the only one with kids. All of my family got together for Christmas last year. Whenever I try to engage in a conversation with my family, they seem to just ignore me. My relatives would hold our babies but not talk to me much beyond that. I was so alone. I was late in my first pregnancy when we got married. A few of my siblings had gotten married before I did and they all had very nice weddings with lots of guests. No one had any interest in coming to mine. We trashed the idea of a wedding and got married at the courthouse. I couldn't even get all of my siblings to attend the little ceremony. We couldn't go on a honeymoon at the time, so I was even more miserable. Recently, my sister told me that our family thinks that I'm just a dumb bimbo with no goals in life, so I have babies instead. She says that's why no one values my input or opinion. They think I'm stupid for having children young. My children were not planned. They also think that I'm stupid for being with a man older than me, but he's my one true love. They don't want me to have any influence over large family decisions because they think that I'm dumb. They ignore me and don't make time for me. How do I get them to take me seriously? My boyfriend, 27, and I, 26, have been together for 2 years. He has a good heart and is normally rational, but his one issue is that he expects to come to me in every occasion no matter how big or small. He even went with me to my ex-boyfriend's funeral after days of begging. Now, my best friend got married a few days ago. It was very small and only close family and friends were invited. My boyfriend couldn't come because of the +1 rule. He pitched a hissy fit saying that my best friend had no respect for my relationship and was shocked when he learned that I was still going to attend. He told me that if he can't go, then I'm expected to not go as well. But that's my best friend and I had to respect her rules. He gave me an ultimatum, either we go together or I stay home with him. I ended up going because again, I respected my friend's rules. He was angry with me and kept calling me the entire 2-hour drive, then stopped. Later I got a text from his friend telling me that he, my boyfriend, got into an accident and was taken to the hospital. I freaked out and he gave me the address and I had to leave the wedding and told my friends why. I was crying the entire drive home and kept calling his friend but got no response. I arrived to the hospital and asked for my boyfriend and they checked and told me that he wasn't there. My anxiety reached 160% as I kept calling his friends one by one. I just went home and there he was, along with his friend. He saw me and said that he was sorry, but this was the only way he could get me to come home after I left him alone. After the initial shock, I just blew up yelling at him about lying and making me leave my friend's wedding and having me literally go to the hospital and freaking out because of him. I kicked his friend out and we got into an argument. He kept talking about how much I love him, thus I left, which is my own doing and not his, and that he was just trying to see if I really chose my friend's wedding over him. He then argued that my friend caused this and I shouldn't agree with her to exclude him. I said what he did was horrible and I called him horrible and then went to my room. It was awful because my friends kept calling to check in on him because they thought that he was really in the hospital. He said I overreacted and then I yelled at the wrong person. Did I go too far? Am I the asshole for yelling at him for making me leave my best friend's wedding? I'm 43 and have a 22-year-old daughter. All my daughter's life, she struggled with mental health issues. She has ADHD, bipolar, and borderline personality disorder. If I'm being honest, I never really understood a lot of my daughter's disorders. I've always approached mental illness as something you just bury deep down. And as a single mother, I've tried to do my best, but I know that I'm not perfect. Well, recently, my daughter asked if I go to one of her therapy sessions with her, and I only agreed to it because she seemed super excited about it. When we got there, her therapist first asked me how I was raised to think about mental health. I said I wasn't raised to think about mental health at all. She then said that she guessed that. It seemed kind of snarky, but I ignored it. She then asked about my family's history with addiction and mental issues. I denied any, and then she started to list all the things that my daughter told her and asked if they were a lie. They weren't a lie, but I never saw any of these things as big issues. She then began to explain to me BPD is a trauma response. She explained it can be caused by many things, but by me invalidating her emotions so much like I was invalidating my own had a part to play in it. She then tried to tell me ways that I can cope with my own trauma so that I can help my daughter cope with hers. After listening to her spew absolute garbage for 30 minutes, I finally got up and told her that she was a fucking quack and didn't know anything that she was talking about. I just stormed out and left. My daughter called me crying an hour later and I told her that she needed to get an actual therapist instead of that bitch. I wasn't upset with my daughter, but I did feel like she kind of threw me to the wolves. After cooling down though, I think maybe I could have handled that wrong, but I'm not sure. Am I the asshole for snapping at my daughter's therapist when she tried to blame my daughter's trauma on me? My husband, 33, got into a car accident almost a month ago. He's been bedridden due to the back injury and I've been his primary caregiver. The pressure has been too much for my mother-in-law. She keeps telling me to take care of him and be there for him constantly. She begged me to take time off of work and I did and asked me to send her hourly updates about his condition during the first 2 weeks. But when I don't, she'd get mad and cause an issue. She visits every day but doesn't do anything to help. Alternatively, she lists things that I should or shouldn't do. The family keeps telling me that she's just worried sick for her son, so I try to stay calm. Days ago, she called to berate me about not replacing the sheets quickly. I had no idea how she found out since my husband didn't call her. I was stunned. However, my sister-in-law called me to tell me that her mother had installed a camera in the bedroom to see if I was taking proper care of her son. After searching the room, I found the camera. I called my mother-in-law and had a huge fight with her. She admitted to it and said that she was just feeling concerned and wanted to make sure that her son was being cared for, despite him calling her every day. I yelled at her, telling her that she's no longer allowed in my home after this. She lost it and went on a rant about how I'm stopping her from seeing her son and that not seeing him will literally make her sick. The family called me later to get me to back out of the decision, but I told them that she breached my privacy and took advantage of the situation. They said I'm taking it too personally and that I can't blame a concerned mother for wanting to make sure that her son's fine, especially since she listed the things she thought I was doing wrong. I ended the conversation, but my husband is upset, telling me that I'm being vindictive and that if his mom can't come, then he'll move in with her. We argued, then I went outside and he's been silent ever since. Am I the asshole for banning my mother-in-law from the house after I discovered that she installed a camera in the bedroom? An emergency medical dispatcher, which basically means that if you call 999 with an emergency and need an ambulance, there's a chance that it'll go to me. It's a rewarding but stressful job, and some of the calls I've handled give me nightmares, but I wouldn't change my job. Some of my hours, however, are extremely unsociable, and sometimes I get home at 4 in the morning, and when I do, I have a routine. When I get home at 4 in the morning, I'll quickly change and then go for an hour-long jog while I listen to a podcast. This jog by 5 in the morning will take me to my boyfriend's bakery where we share a meal, breakfast for him, dinner for me. On the days I work this kind of shift, it's the only time we get to see each other. I then help him set up a little before heading back to my home and sleeping. All in all, nothing abnormal ever happens, but a new neighbor recently moved into my cul-de-sac. A woman in her late 30s or early 40s, I'm not sure. I don't know my neighbors that well as I don't often have the ability to socialize with them due to my work hours. During one of my recent jogs, I paused on my way out of the cul-de-sac on the pavement near her home to pick out a podcast on my phone, only to have her come out shouting at me about what am I doing near her home and how I better go before she calls the police. I quickly apologized to her and explained that I'm her neighbor and just out for a jog. She didn't believe me, so instead of her, I had to go unlock my front door to prove to her yes, I lived here as she kept shouting about the police. After this, she stopped and retreated back into her home, so I continued my jog. Except she was watching me the next time I jogged and the next and the next. Each time calling out vague threats about police and how I shouldn't be out at this time and how I was scaring her children always being out at this time. Now I admit I'd finally had enough of this and laughed at her because I'm a 5-foot tall woman who looks like a solid breeze could blow me over. I also told her to mind her own fucking business and how only she seems like a weirdo here, always watching me going for a jog at this hour. And I told her that if she called 999 to say hi to my coworkers for me. I'm not proud of how I lost my temper, but it is getting to me how she's always doing this. It wasn't until my boyfriend suggested over our shared meal that day that maybe she just had anxiety and seeing someone outside so early put her on edge and that she was handling it poorly. I admit I felt guilty after that. I thought that me jogging for an hour after my shift was harmless, but I'm used to being up at weird hours. Am I the asshole for jogging at 4 in the morning? Would you be bothered if your neighbor was doing this? My wife is a cancer patient. She unfortunately started losing her hair due to chemotherapy and she's been incredibly insecure about it, her lack of hair in particular. She got a wig and started wearing it. I don't mind it. I 100% support her since she only wears it around family and friends. Now my sister lost her apartment after a messy divorce and moved in with her twin daughter, 16, almost a month ago. Things have been going well except for my niece's constant remarks about my wife's wig. They got so hung up on it and kept asking lots of questions about it. They asked to take turns trying it on, suggested that they straighten it with their straightener and so on, which was exhausting. They even pressured to see her without it, but my wife was uncomfortable and refused. Yesterday I got home and found that my wife is locking herself in the bedroom and crying. I asked her what happened. She told me that she woke up and didn't find her wig and then discovered that my nieces took it and hid it and urged her to come out so that they could see her without it. My wife repeatedly asked them to give it back, but they started laughing and recording. My wife had to lock the door to keep the distance because they didn't stop. I was fuming and went to the kitchen and confronted them. They acted confused, but I was able to get the wig back. I lashed out telling them that they humiliated my wife and embarrassed her by taking her wig. They said it was just a lighthearted prank which made me go off on them. My sister got involved and said that my wife was just being sensitive and the girls were just curious to see her without her wig, but she overreacted. I told her that her daughters were recording her. She saw nothing wrong in it and said that I overreacted as well. I lost it on her too and told her that she and my nieces are no longer welcome to stay at my home and they needed to leave. I later let them know about the eviction since they thought I wasn't being serious, but they started crying and begging that I let it go. However, my wife is no longer comfortable around them after what they did. My sister called our elderly dad and he begged that I let him stay and insisted my nieces were just acting like typical teenagers. He offered to speak to my wife, but I declined. They've been begging that I change my mind, but I kept refusing. Am I the asshole for evicting my sister and her daughters after they hid my wife's wig and embarrassed her? I'm 16 and my stepbrother is 16, we'll call him H, and my dad 44 and his mom 33 started dating 2 years ago and married 1 year ago. They also moved in with us a year ago. My stepbrother and I go to the same school, we're both in year 11, however we're polar opposites. I'm upper middle class, pretty slim, popular, devout Catholic, well-behaved, etc. And he's working class, quite chubby, atheist. He's also popular, however he's your typical working class punk teen who has been arrested multiple times and constantly misbehaves. The school we go to is in northern England and is overwhelmingly working class, so it's a miracle that I've managed to fit in. Now to the point. Since they moved in, my dad and stepmom and my 2 youngest step-siblings have converted to Catholicism. However, H has refused. He said he was raised atheist and refuses to convert to Catholicism. This creates alienation in our family with him being the odd one out. A lot of the time he's out sleeping on his friend's couch or he's confined to his room because my dad and stepmom always pester him about his religious beliefs. They try to force him to convert to Catholicism by threatening consequences if he doesn't go to church, however nothing has worked. Today we were in English class. I'm in the same form group as H, and H was talking about how my dad nicked his mom and turned her into a religious nutcase. He also spoke about how he resents both my dad and his mom for trying to force him to assimilate to the church and alienating him just because he doesn't want to. I pretended not to hear him, however I secretly wrote everything he was saying down with the intention of showing my stepmom and dad. When I got home later that day after school, I usually always get there before him because he's pissing about with his mates most of the time. I showed stepmom and dad what he had said. They were both livid and rang H up demanding that he come home immediately. When he got home, dad and stepmom shouted at him and demanded that he come to their room to talk. I put my ear on the door to listen and they told him that he was no longer allowed in the house and disowned him. That was a bit harsh in my opinion, however when H came out, he didn't look fussed at all, and he said that he'll just go sleep on his friend's couch. He's been gone for a couple hours now and his stepmom and dad have received a lot of backlash from his aunt, uncle, cousins, extended family, etc. on my stepmom's side of the family. So he must have gotten in touch with his extended family about the incident. I have mixed feelings about this, because I feel guilty for getting him kicked out. However, I think that stepmom and dad deserve to know that H resents them and dubs them as religious nutcases. Am I the asshole for getting my stepbrother kicked out of the house? At 24, having been with my fiance 24 for 7.5 years. We started dating our senior year of high school. He has always said that he was waiting to propose until we had enough money for a wedding. I always told him that I would go to the courthouse or have a very small wedding. He was the one that wanted a big party. There was also his family drama that held him back because he was hoping to mend his relationship with his family before getting married so that they could attend. Long story short, he finally realized that his parents weren't going to be civil and they are no longer in our lives. I began anticipating him proposing after that. He finally did this past Christmas. It felt like we were finally moving forward with our lives. After he proposed, I realized I did indeed want a real wedding, though still something small. He again was trying to make it bigger than what I wanted or what we could afford. He said that we should be celebrating our lives together after all the pain and drama we had put up in our lives. So I began planning a wedding. My father works at a private golf course and they offer to use a venue for a fraction of the cost. I don't have the exact numbers yet, but they waived the site fee, $5,000. I get all the enhancements for free, which is a $2,500 value, and I don't have to have their minimum person count. We're essentially paying for the food and drink and will still be given a discounted price. On top of that, my grandparents and parents are planning on chipping in. I really imagine my fiance and I only paying about $5,000 out of pocket for DJ and attire. And I plan on having people gift money for a house instead of items for wedding gifts. To me, this wedding is important and is a dream wedding that I thought I'd never be able to afford. But my fiance thinks that we should scrap it all and focus on buying a house in the next 2 to 3 years. But that we could get married at the courthouse, even though it was his idea for a big wedding. And maybe have a wedding after we buy a house. So to me, this means that I won't have a wedding for another 5-ish years and who knows if my dad will still be at this job or have this amazing offer. Am I being unreasonable for wanting this wedding?